Really looking forward to our session tonight and a very cool conversation with John Williams. So just we'll take a few minutes to rev up and get ready for that. I'd invite you just to take a moment and just let yourself sort of land in the space. It's a busy time. It's a busy planet. We've all got lots going on. And I'm sure you had, probably had a very full day leading up to this moment. You've probably got stuff to do after our time together. You've got emails and texts coming in. You got people coming into the room. There's so much going on. And, in my experience as a performance coach of athletes and other humans, probably one of the greatest detractors from performance is distraction. And when we're in a moment, but we're slightly distracted or stretched or pulled into other moments as well. So just as we're coming here for this evening, just invite you just to give yourself a couple moments to breathe and just to arrive in the same way that you call on your athletes to breathe and arrive when they're getting ready to step into a training run or a competition run, just to kind of be fully present. And my experience is the power of this, of a group like this being fully present is quite extraordinary and quite exponential. So it's exciting to give ourselves the chance to have this time together and make the most of it. We have a few apologies tonight, one of which is Ben, and with his permission, I'm going to tell a very short story about Ben, which will lead us into our check-in. Ben had a very unexpected event happen to him last night, and that's why he's not here with us tonight. He was at home, just having a nice quiet evening, and with a guest and his daughter, and they were in different parts of the house, and he was sort of doing some work after dinner, and he heard the front door open and then close, and he thought, they must just be locking the door. It was about 9 p.m. So they must just be locking up the gate and locking the door because they hadn't when they got home that night. And then about 10 minutes later, he heard his name called out, and he went kind of walking out to the front. And normally, right inside, about 2 meters inside Ben's front door, is a bowl that holds the car keys and various other items. And that bowl was missing from the front hall table. And Ben looked around, well, that's a bit strange, stepped outside, and both of the vehicles whose keys were in that bowl were gone. And so in a strange moment at 9 p.m. in Elwood, Victoria, someone stepped into Ben's open house, took the keys for both of their cars, and drove away with them last night. And I'm only laughing because Ben was laughing when he told me. But what a bizarre and intense and intrusive moment. And, then he was there for the next sort of 4 or 5 hours with police and fingerprinting and all this sort of things. And when last I spoke with Ben today, there was still no sign of the vehicles. And he was just grateful that he has insurance. And he was so cool about it and so calm about it. That I got really interested in the moment, and he said that the police and others were remarking about how cool and calm he was about it. And he said, look, he kind of ran the thing in his mind, and he realized it was horrible. It felt weird, and it's kind of a strange violation to have someone step into your house that you don't know. He said, but he realized it was probably good fortune that he or his house guest didn't see the person, wasn't there standing in the front hall, because it could have been a really, really horrible event, on a personal level. And, and he was quite cool and calm and collected about it, and just going through the motions with the insurance company and stuff like that. So the question for the group as a check-in, and we'll send you to a breakout just to have a 3-minute conversation, just to kind of get into our conversation tonight, is how do you go in moments of pressure or crisis? What does it bring out in you? And if you just brought that kind of story onto the mountain, and think about a moment or a time when something totally unexpected has happened that maybe appeared to be a crisis or a tragedy or something really bad, and the way you responded as a coach had an impact on that moment, good or bad. So just a quick kind of check-in. How do you respond to crisis? How do you respond when trouble or challenge, unexpected, lands on your doorstep or with your team? And how do you treat these moments as a coach? How'd you guys go? Tom Hodges, how do you navigate crisis?
G'day. Sorry, I was still on mute there. Yeah, no, it's an interesting question, and yeah, Tim and I and Barbara were talking about that, about how you have to sort of just go into focus mode a little bit and just go, okay, what needs to happen exactly now? How can I assist in that direct moment and get a little bit drilled in? But then Barbara was talking as well, and raised a really great point about giving ourselves time and space sort of after the event to make sure that we're collected and can let the adrenaline settle down after, depending on what the crisis was. But I think that tunnel vision sort of thing starts to happen pretty quickly. We were using the example of an injury on the hill, but lots of crises can have different effects. But
really good, really interesting. I think I certainly have noticed it. I think last year, those who were in the academy last year, when we were going through the floods here in this area, there was a period where there was a lot of crisis around, and I noticed that kind of like sort of heightened level of focus and decisiveness, and just this kind of like forced centeredness, right? That just comes. And but I love that impulse that Barbara shared, that actually, also good to give yourself space when the crisis moment has passed to kind of regulate. I guess in nature we see how if an animal's been chased, a deer's been chased by a lion and then gets away, then there's a moment when they kind of collapse, don't they? And they have to actually re-regulate and reset their nervous system. Really interesting. What did other people say? Josh, Josh Laney, how do you respond in a crisis? What did you guys talk about?
It seemed like all three of us we hit that almost too calm, it's quiet, too quiet kind of thing, where we all kind of sit there and everybody's like, "Are you okay? Are you?" No, I'm processing.
Yeah,
I'm going to make a plan and we're going to figure it out, instead of the frantic energy. And then sound like what Tom was talking about, where I personally get too laser focused on the thing I can see in front of me, and I'm going to fix that one thing, and then to the exclusion of, oops, there probably were 3 other things I should have dealt with.
Yeah, interesting.
So that's my personal one, is I get too quiet and too focused.
Yeah, interesting. I think there's a nervous system kind of regulation process that oftentimes will go into fight, flight, or freeze. And the super calm is sometimes like a form of freezing, right? We kind of like, we go so quiet that it's, as you said, maybe it's too calm sometimes. Maddie Conroy.
I'm trying to see that people, you haven't frozen it. You're still working on it. Just saying you're still working on it. You haven't frozen, you're still working, but people assume you're in shock. It's like, no, I'm just thinking.
That's right. I love it. Interesting. Who else? Matt Conroy, what did you guys talk about?
We kind of touched on how it sort of react very different depending on the situation, and if it's a moment of crisis or high pressure that you've had a lot of training in, that it's much easier to deal with, and how the fact that if you're dealing with those high pressure moments or stressful moments, we'll find it much easier when we're looking at it like as a third party sort of thing from the outside and dealing with it for other people, whereas sort of coming back to those moments in our own lives, sort of very different reactions.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. How just that slight amount of separation between you and who's dealing with the crisis, just having that little bit of distance oftentimes gives you a perspective that you might not have immediately if you're in it, right? Which is,
Yeah.
which I guess, is in a way one of the roles of coach, right? Is somehow you're in the moment, but if it's something that your athlete's dealing with, somehow being connected enough to it to know what's needed, but having that little bit of space in your thinking that you can provide a perspective that isn't wrapped up in the situation. Yeah, very cool. Interesting. Zach, Howard, how about for you? Any what to add from your group?
Well, I think we all talked about similar thing, like with accidents, and just staying calm and assessing the situation and doing what we can. I did say, like, I couldn't really think of anything in terms of like a crisis moment in coaching that wasn't really like a athlete getting hurt or something like that. And then reflecting about writing down as just staying calm, think about what I can do and everything I can do, and just do that, and that's all you can do. And then you kind of take that away from just the coaching side of kids getting injured, but like it's the same with setting up the program and doing all the back end of coaching, and it's like you just do what you can do.
Yeah, that's it. In the end, that's it. That's interesting. Yeah, great. Any other high-level thoughts or reflections from the team? Great, some great insights. I'm gonna send this recording to Ben to let him know we're thinking about him and that we've got some insights that might help him in coming days. Very cool. Awesome, guys. So I'm gonna do just a lightning recap of last month's session, where we met with Shane Pill, and we explored the spectrum of coaching styles. If you weren't able to come to that session, it was recorded, and I think we also sent out the slide pack. Super cool, really, really interesting exploration around something which is probably intuitive for a lot of you, but to put a framework around it, to put some labels around it, to kind of put some boundaries and definitions, kind of, in my experience, listening to Shane talk and listening to the group respond, sort of just heightens the awareness of how do we approach our coaching in different situations. And Shane shared a model, which is kind of also a way of thinking about and even planning your coaching sessions. And it's really kind of moving along a spectrum that on one end of the spectrum is loaded with you, the coach, really guiding and kind of directing the decision making of the players, and moving more in the direction of the athletes guiding and directing the decision making, and your role more as a facilitator and kind of support mechanism, and kind of recognizing both of those big extremes. We have some athletes that are super strong, self-starter, self-directed, self-motivated, know where they're going, train harder than any coach could ever have them train. And the role that you play as a coach with that kind of athlete might be different than an emerging athlete who's just still learning how to develop those the resilience of self-motivation, that sort of thing. And so we're not going to unpack them now, but Shane unpacked these 11 different styles in kind of a progressive approach, from a sort of command, task-focused approach right through to more of a player-initiated, player self-coaching approach. And I thought it was super cool. And in specific, I kind of find myself honing into this sort of middle of the space where we're in discovery phase with the athletes, where our questioning and our inquiry with the athletes is pulling them and sometimes even us to discover new ways of doing things, that we're not just asking them just basic questions about awareness around their training, but we're actually we're getting creative with our inquiry to really help them actually think differently. And that's a different sort of skill, to be able to go into those areas where we're actually hitting the edge of our athletes' awareness or thinking about something. And we might actually even be hitting the edge of our own thinking about something, right? When we got to be willing to kind of step into the unknown and discover, a new way of doing things. I love this kind of element in when I think about coaching. The mogul coaches in the group might remember Johnny Mosley as a name, the 98 gold medal winner in moguls. He and his coach Cooper Shell, they had they had like a 6-month discovery period which they invented a dryland mogul machine to kind of really try to understand how Johnny could ski more directly and take like seconds off of his time. And the season that he won, he was like, I don't remember, but he was like 4 seconds faster than anybody. Like he was so and it was really because both Coop, who was a super refined professional, and Johnny were able to go on a discovery journey. So I really worth revisiting Shane's work here. And maybe I'll just pause for a moment. Any reflections from the group after the session with Shane that you tried or leaned into one of those styles more, or just brought a little bit more awareness, in the sessions that followed or the week that followed? Anybody with an example to share? Crickets.
Yeah, I'll go.
All right, go, Chappie.
Yeah, I guess just it's something like Georgie Leal, who was the head coach of Parrish Women's Sports Club mogul team 10, almost 10 years ago. It's something she's, I guess, always been big on, getting feedback from the athletes and I guess having them involved in the process and stuff. And yeah, just as they get older, it goes from more from that command, I guess, style to more that, that two-way style. But even working with sort of 12, 13, 14-year-olds, we get to comps and sometimes they're like, rather than them being, you telling them, all right, you're going to do a twister on the top air and a 3 on the bottom air. It's kind of already becoming a lot more that conversation of, all right, well, what do you feel more comfortable with? Or, these are your options, like, which do you feel better with? So I guess going towards that sort of player coach, two-way feedback and doing that more and more. Yeah. Even with 13, 14-year-olds.
It's great. It's great, Ben. I think that's astute of you to recognize that applies, even young, young in the younger, that the athletes are starting to think for themselves and feel, and it ultimately leads to confidence, right? For the moments when you're not there with them in the gate, or you're not there, they have those questions running, and they've made those decisions on their own, guided by you 100 times. And so in the moment when they need that confidence, they can take a deep breath and they can back themselves, right? So
yeah, well, and I think the thing I guess maybe not necessarily struggled with, but I guess playing around with that this season is realizing that it might work with someone, but especially on a comp day, but with someone else, if you do that, then they get stressed because they're like, oh, but they're like, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? So while some of them, I can do this, where some of the others on comp day, I need to be like, all right, you are doing this trick on this trick. Because otherwise they get, they get in their own head, I guess, about, oh, should I be doing a 3? Or, oh, I might crash it. Or, oh, like this trick will score better. So yeah, it I guess, again, it depends on the athlete.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it depends on the athlete and the situation, right? So, and so it's a sliding scale, not only between athlete and athlete, but probably moment to moment. And there's certain athletes that you might get really comfortable being very non-directive with, very inquiry, discovery based, but then there might be a moment when you can just see it in their eyes. They need you just to be really clear you know, and certain for them in a moment when they're not sure, right? And it can flip the other way as well. That, you know, someone who you're always directed with, there might be a moment where there's an opening and you realize, oh, this is actually a problem for them to solve, right? So it's dynamic work, this coaching work, super dynamic.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's great, Ben. Thanks for sharing that. Well, I think what we talked about, and if you guys remember at the end of the conversation last time with Shane, he said, "Oh, you know who you guys should talk to is John Williams, because he's actually doing a lot of exploration of gaming, of this spectrum, and of training personal and social responsibility with snow sports, and you know, and then James Winter, who was here, said, yeah, he's a perisher." And so through a great kind of just, I guess, not a coincidence, but a great kind of spontaneous alignment, we have the opportunity to build on what Shane shared with us last month with a great conversation with John this evening. And I really appreciated the last couple of conversations I had with John, just getting to know you, John, and a little bit about your work. And I'm really excited to hand the reins over to you and let you share a little bit about your research and your exploration around training personal and social responsibility, in my simpleton mind, how I'm thinking of it as coaching the whole human, and your steps into that in the snow world, which seems to be some pioneering work in terms of that TPSR work. And I think similar to what we learned with Shane last month, I would say some of the aspects of what you're going to share tonight are things that as coaches, we might naturally go, oh yeah, I do that already. You know, it's really natural. It's not in a sense, it's not rocket science. And if I would say when you're on your game, when you're your best coach, you're probably doing all of these things naturally. But what I love about what you're going to share tonight, John, is that we have an opportunity to kind of to heighten our awareness and to become more conscious and more intentional and more deliberate about how we actually use this type of tools to develop our athletes and ultimately also improve their results and their performance. So welcome, John. Thanks for being here with us tonight, and looking forward to having your sharing with the group.
Thank you so much, Chip, and hello everybody. I know a few of you from Perisher and other people. I'd like to introduce my colleagues as well that are here kindly to assist the special guest that Chip spoke about before. So Professor Barbara Pamphilon, and also Associate Professor Tracy Dixon, who's done a lot of work in snow sports as well. And Barbara is a very enthusiastic skier. Her son's a racer, very familiar with Perisher and Threadbow. So we're not just academics, we all have some kind of buy-in and connection to snow sports. So yeah, I mean, I want to keep it fairly informal as well, despite the formal slides and so on. And I have got some breakout discussions and so on. And like academics, we like to write a lot, and I'm looking at the amount of text on that slide, but you can maybe look at that in your own time. But I guess what I've done there is I've kind of a bio for each of us, and just what I've said there are kind of backgrounds. And unfortunately, Sarah Forsyth can't make it today, but some of you will know Sarah from she's got at least one child in Perisher Winter Sports Club in the Pathways programme, and she's a qualified instructor, and she runs a lodge up at the Snow. But the four of us are involved in this research, but also people who are TPSR, or Teaching Personal Social Responsibility experts from the US and New Zealand. So I'm super excited, and as Chip said there, the word I used was, or the word that you used earlier on, was intuitive. A lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight, your first reaction will be, yeah, I do that. I do that in coaching, and definitely we're not here to teach people to suck eggs. It's more about trying to, as Chip said, I think, make you aware, and more, I guess looking for the teaching opportunities around TPSR. I'm looking for that on a kind of more consistent and regular basis, and it'll start to have more kind of rigor and I guess opportunity and impact in your coaching. So I guess a lot of this stuff is there already, and I'll give. I think Chip wanted me to give some examples of my own experience this season. So again, because I'm aware of TPSR, and because we've got a Badminton World Federation grant that actually Barbara helped us put together. So we're looking at badminton using TPSR in a physical education setting. But being in the snow and having this awareness about TPSR and doing coaching part-time with Perisher over the winter, I'm more aware of it. It's in the forefront of my mind, and I'm looking for these opportunities. So I thought I'd just give, without giving the game away too much, I guess just some things I shared with Chip. So during the winter, I don't think Jan's here today, but Jan and Beck and myself were often on Widner, I think it's called it, at Guthiga. And our kids would be coming down the race course and they'd go straight onto the priority queue, and there'd be a line of about 100 public standing there. And what I did was I started to get, and Jan was doing this bit about we do this already. So Jan was doing this already, and it was like, right, let's ask if you can go in that space there. So talk to the member of the public and so on. So I've kind of built on that, and it's one of the values to do with TPSR that I'll introduce in a minute. So I was getting the kids I had, I said to them, right, see that person in the green jacket? When they come up to the start of about to go on the tee bar, I want you to say to them, do you mind if we go in front of you? That was the words I was using. And I get my kids to look these people in the eye, and these kids were U14, and say, excuse me, would you mind if I moved into this space and to go up the lift? And the public, almost without exception, were blown away with how polite those kids were and the level of engagement, and always said, yes, of course you can, and so on, right? And they'd make comments to me about, that's amazing those kids are doing that. Is this a new thing you're doing? And I would tell them a bit about the research and all that on the T-bar when I was going up with these people. But interesting, this is the depth of this. One example, our U16 athletes were there one day, and they said, what we should be saying is, do you mind if we go behind those people instead of, do you mind if we go in front of you? And I thought, far out, you're taking this to a different level of engagement and understanding. And I think that what Chip spoke about, I'll give one more example very quickly, but what Chip spoke about was better human beings. And I think that if you look at the number of kids we've got in our programs, there's only so many of them are going to be podium finishes, to quote some of the parents that we talked to. So for most of those kids, to me, there needs to be something more in the program that they get out of it. And talking to Chip as well, he kind of felt that at the top level, those citizenship skills make the final maybe 15%, I think is what you said, towards being the people that really make it, because there's so many applications of this. So I'll give one more quick example, and it'll give you a bit of a kind of taster for what this is about. So the other example I've got is I had a kid this year who, the program I had, so I had a kid for about 35 days. I had 5 kids. And this one boy used to give up last year. He used to, when he fell over, he'd have massive meltdown. He would be really hard to get him to continue, and he would be ready to give up. This year, he's grown up quite a lot, and he'd fall over and he'd have, things wouldn't go his way. On the Traverse to Guthiga from Perisher a few weeks ago, we're getting hailstones in our face the day that I forgot to wear my neck warmer. And he was in tears at the end of it, and he was ready to give up. He didn't have the right skis. He thought that the powder skis weren't the best option. And I said to him, on the T-bar, I said to him, you know what? In 10 years' time, when you look back at your time in Perisher Winter Sports Club, I want you to remember this moment on this T-bar when, I'm just talking to you about how your resilience and how your ability to not give up, how that's really improved. And I gave him lots of examples on that T-bar about what fantastic growth he had experienced during the season. And to me, that was as impactful as his technical development. And I think it's something he will remember, and something his parents remembered when I put it in his report about how this kid had really improved. So there's a couple of examples of what this is. So I think too much talking, we all like to talk and write as academics. I think maybe we'll get into the next slide, Chip, and we can sort of get into some some of the kind of learning about this. So this is, as I say, meant to involve you, and I wonder, have you got time? It takes about 5 minutes, but I think this interview with my colleague, Associate Professor Andrew Richards, kind of just gives another voice explaining this really well. He's one of the world's experts in TPSR. Are we okay to show that, do you think, Chip? Have you got time?
If the only thing I'm not sure is if
People can hear it.
If people will be able to hear it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you're doing the technology, not me. No pressure.
Let me
Yeah.
try and see. Hold on one sec. We'll just see. Does it normally play automatically on the let's see what happens here.
Yeah, it would if you just click it, but if it doesn't work and it's too much, we can just get into it. It won't matter too much. Don't worry about it, Chip. We can send it to people to watch.
We'll send it after. I think that's
Yeah, that's okay. That's all right. So this is one of these stressful moments you spoke about at the very beginning, you know, when things don't go your way. Yeah, exactly. Like anyway, that's all right. We'll keep going. All right, they stuffed up the slides now. We're doing that. Are you all right?
Yeah. Oh, you. What are you seeing? Sorry.
Yeah, just go into the next one, then we'll just get into it so that we can move on. Yeah, all right. So what that little audio was about was in this approach, some of our students confuse this with a behaviour management approach. It's not behaviour management, it's what we'd call pedagogy. So the spectrum of teaching styles that my colleague Shane Poole spoke about, we do a lot of work together, we write together. This is another example of a pedagogical approach. So the examples of A to J on the spectrum of teaching styles, this is another example of a model of instruction or a pedagogy. So within TPSR, it's really about what Chip was talking about earlier. It's about building better human beings, almost as a byproduct of the coaching that we do or the physical education teaching we do. And sport and physical education provide a platform in which we can actually purposefully develop those 5 values. Sometimes they're called levels, but a bit like the spectrum of teaching styles, you don't have to move in order through those different values. You can teach any of these values at any time, and according to the coaching situation and so on. So basically there's 5 values. Sometimes they're represented a little bit differently. The kind of background to this is that Don Hellison was a physical education teacher, and his kids in the States either went to prison or they went to the Marines, and he developed this program to make them into better human beings using physical education as a platform. But since then, it's equally applicable in sport. As I say, we've got a badminton project and so on. So level 1's about respect. You know, you can read these yourself. Respect's level 1. Here's level 2, effort and participation. Sometimes that isn't level 2, and depending on what reading you look at, but it actually doesn't matter because, like I say, you don't need to progress through these in order. So effort and participation, self-direction, helping others, and leadership, so caring for other people. And then the last one about transfer is how we can use those skills that we learn in skiing, those other 4 values, and how we can actually transfer them to other parts of our life. So the example I gave you about the kid in the T-bar, the whole point was he lots of meltdowns this season where he was ready to wrap it, but he came round and he got up and he went again at it. So when we talk about resilience in education, for example, and we talk to kids about that, it's a very kind of loosely termed and passed about expression. But I think in our environment, we've got fantastic examples of resilience because we're outside in all weathers. Unlike the Mogul people that are here in Alpine, they start at 6 o'clock in the morning sometimes. It's having a bit of fun there. But, you know, there's a whole lot of things that are really full on, like getting up early, having to prepare equipment, being tired, going home and getting up and doing it again, and doing your studies and so on. So there's a lot of things that are quite unique in our environment. So, you know, I'll just quickly go down the right-hand column. So self-control, under respect, but respecting, you know, coaches, other athletes, a right to be included and be part of that environment. And I think when I'm talking about some of these things, or start to trigger some of your own reflections and ideas. We'll come on to that in a minute. Effort and participation, this idea about intrinsic motivation, coming from yourself and getting the kids to actually take ownership. So this is very much about, I guess, a very important point here is it's about getting our athletes to take ownership for this. And when you look at the spectrum of teaching styles or coaching styles, we talk about student directed and teacher directed. Now, the whole point about this is it's about being student directed. So the thing about it as well is, instead, if I did this season, I'll put my hand up because we haven't embedded this program yet, but I've said to kids, you know what, you're not showing me respect, you're not doing a warm-up, and it's not really helpful, etc. And this program or this approach is to move away from that, where the kids take ownership for this instead of the coach having a confrontational moment, if you like, about you know, you should be doing this, should be doing that, you're not doing this. It's trying to get them to want to take this on board, almost selling this those 5 values to them, for them to actually appreciate why they're important, not just for skiing, but in their life generally. Self-direction is more about them taking responsibility, not always looking to the coach, looking to them to actually be self-driven in terms of their own intrinsic feedback, but also in terms of goal setting and so on. Helping others. Eventually, I did bits of this. I had my kids taking warm-ups. Again, I'm sure you're thinking, I do that all the time. What's new about this? Hopefully, by the end of this, you'll see what's new about it. And I've explained about transfer. So if we can go on to the next slide, Chip, that'd be great. I'm just conscious of time. I wanted not have to do all the talking here. So this is something that Chip asked me to do. And this is where maybe you'll start to shift your thinking away from, well, yeah, I do that stuff, but what I'm now asking you is, to what extent do you do this deliberately, consistently, and regularly? Do you actually do some of those things? Do you do it on an ad hoc, one-off basis, or do you do this a lot? So this is the first breakout task. So I'll just read it. Perhaps you can relate to some of the TPSR values in the last slide. I'm not sure how we can do this, Chip, so that people can still see the slide in the breakout rooms. That's going to be an issue there, but you might want to write down, if we go to the, actually, you can just write them down from that slide. Before you go to the breakout rooms, you need to write down what those values are.
Yeah, just take a picture.
Take a picture. Yeah, absolutely. Take a photo.
Unless you're using your photo. Unless you're using your phone.
In which case, get your mum to do it, or some other responsible adult. Just so you know what the values we're talking about. And then from a scale from 1 to 5, just how well you do that on a regular basis. Like a 1 would be, I do it sometimes ad hoc, or 5 is I do this all the time, you know, like it's, or a lot of the time I'll look to create self-direction opportunities. Okay.
So great. So just clarifying, John, you're wanting them to kind of, in a way, assess themselves. How deliberately do they build these skills in their athletes?
Exactly. Thanks for translating for me, Chip, you know, because all these other people have got accents and they don't always understand. So it's good that you explained that. Yeah, that's exactly right. And this was something I thought was good that you came up with, where it kind of, it gets you thinking a bit deeper about, well, you know, I do that, but really how much do you do it? And how consciously do you do this in your work? Okay.
Yeah, great. All right. I'm going to open the breakout rooms and so just have a bit of an assessment, and maybe even just in terms of time, hone in on the one that you do the most, that you really find that you actually is a strength of yours. You know, you really find you're really good, or you really put a lot of energy on building, you know, self-direction or building respect, and then see if you can identify one which is a bit of a gap for you. Like you just don't even think about it, or you don't consciously address it.
If you can also allocate my colleagues Barbara and Tracy into these breakout groups to help a bit, that'd be good as well.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm opening the rooms, guys.
All right. So we're back in the main room. So we had some interesting discussion in our group, Chip, and I'd like to just kind of open out a wee bit to have that whole class or workshop kind of input. I mean, there was interest, a lot of similarity in the 5 of us that were in that breakout room. I'm interested to hear what other people found in their breakout rooms, if there was, if you managed to get through it, and if there was any kind of patterns and what you found. Maybe Barbara, what did you find in your one?
I won't speak for the group. Someone in the group can speak.
All right.
Go, guys.
That was yeah, Nick, Tim, Tom. What did you guys talk about?
I think, yeah, g'day. Look, we sort of talked a little bit about how like, it was good to put these things back like into forefront of our mind and like take it back to like recent times in the season where we were actually on the hill coaching, and just like talk a little examples of, you know, where they are and how you can instill some of these things early into your group, especially like Nick was talking about like the leadership and whatnot amongst his team. But no, it was, and then like also from myself's position, like, and the other guys in the group, we had sorry, I forget who else was there, but anyway, we were saying you know, when we've got a spectrum of athletes who are some are more experienced than others, you know, you can get into that like level 4, like helping other in the leadership sort of thing, and you can instill that early if, you know, if you're doing it right. But I know it was a good little discussion we had.
Yeah.
Barbara, what did I miss there?
Anything to add, Barbara?
No, I thought it was really great because each of the coaches had very different groups as well, but we were sort of all feeling that thinking about this more overtly could really happen, could, you know, raise us to the next step, really. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And I like that point, Tom, how in a given team you might have a spectrum of athletes that are kind of working at different levels of this, right? So some might be just really in the basics of kind of learning some core self or mutual respect values, whereas others might be, I guess, a bit further down the track or in a space where they're really demonstrating leadership skills. And I mean, I know one of the things that's probably one of the greatest assets to you as a coach is, for example, if you have someone in your team who's a natural leader, who's naturally expressing one of these qualities really well, they can often be a better influence or even a stronger influence to the other athletes than you know, kind of directly trying to tell them what to do or build those qualities. So that's interesting.
Totally agree, 100%. Yeah.
What else? Oh, sorry, John.
No, on you go.
Tracy, how about your group? What did you hear?
It was interesting because most of the coaches said that they were doing parts of it. And I think similar to sort of what you're saying, Chip and Barbara, it's not so much doing it, but intentionally doing it and having a framework for it and having a plan for it so that you can see how these pieces fit together and therefore leverage them more successfully. But yeah, it was great hearing stories of 10 and 11-year-olds leading their group, you know, kids that, you know, you wouldn't typically expect that. And again, you know, for the 16-year-olds who, you know, 13, 14, 15, 16, who may be the ones who are a bit wayward, but again, you know, getting in, supporting one another. The other thing that stood out to me as I was listening to the coaches and, you know, using the technical term is the emotional labour of coaching. That so much is on the coach to prop up the group if somebody's having a down day and giving out so much of themselves that the question then became for me is how then do they fill themselves back up in a healthy way, because we all know the ski industry has unhealthy methods as well, but what refills them so that they can back up tomorrow and give out more of that emotional support and care and leadership.
Yeah, I think it's the whole piece around coach well-being and you know, just the recognition that this is a service industry. Like, this is a massively you know, energetically challenging work, right? And just respecting that, right? And recognizing that just as we would expect or hope or coach our athletes to recover well after a training day, we need to find ways to do that ourselves, right? It might not be an ice bath or stretching. It might be something else, right? You know, writing in our journal or meditating or, you know, just going for a walk and just like actually taking some deep breaths. So I think that's, great point. I'm curious if there was any of the groups had a natural, where was the natural gap are one of these common areas that we don't really lean into enough, or you thought, oh, you know, you really could put more energy into this?
No.
Question for me was around transfer.
Transfer.
Yeah, because the scenario that just again listening to the coaches, the scenario that came to mind was kids who ride park, and when they're there with their mates, are they transferring the culture, the enthusiasm, the leadership, the support that you're generating in your lessons to their mates when they're in park together as a group of 14-year-olds? And often they do. Actually, they're usually quite supportive of one another, but you know, having plans for helping them to see they can transfer it and apply it in a different context, or with their little 9-year-old sister or whatever it is.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I know, I mean, if you take that even further, I think that you know, to this day, some of my greatest life lessons have happened on the mountain, right? You know, and they stay with me when I'm in the boardroom with a group of leaders from Canada or something, right? It's interesting how, and if we're as coaches marking those moments, like you said, John, when you're on the lift with that athlete who was struggling with the hail against his face, and you were kind of coaching him to be resilient, you know, becoming astute at recognizing those moments, that this is not just a technical growth moment, this is a life moment potential for this athlete, and being
Absolutely.
there to just lean into it and help guide that, I think that's huge.
See, that's the thing, and it's like I'll come back to some transfer. I think what people are realizing here is that the more you think about these things, you identify the teachable opportunities or the coaching opportunities for doing them. To me, one of the big things for transfer, having a daughter who's shall we say challenging, who's in the winter sports club, and you know, think like timekeeping, you know, like getting to the meeting point on time and having everything and being organized. I mean, it's a challenging environment to do that when you're tired. For us as coaches, when Tracy was talking about the emotional energy, but you know, for young kids to remember to have their back protector, you know, to have their equipment, and the consequences they don't have their back protector, you know, and it's like it avoids as well the coach having to say, right, you're going to go home because you've broken the rule. With no back protector, you can't train. So instead of it becoming that kind of confrontational thing, it's like the kids take ownership, and it's like, well, there's consequences, and you need to take that on, and not have your parents packing your bag and packing your lunch and being responsible for putting your stuff in the car. To me, that's a massive transfer into life that you're talking about, Chip, about, you know, things that are going to be applicable. And like you said in the park, Tracy, as well, I mean, what bothers me in the park, and you've done a lot of research in the series about helmets, number of people you see in the helmet, without helmets in the park. And it's like the stuff that they learn with the coaching sessions from the coach about safety and about helmet, to me, that's a transfer into the park. That should be happening. And I wonder to what extent it does happen when they get into that group, you know. But I noticed in my breakaway group, there's a lot of commonality with respect, effort and participation were scored pretty high. And then when it came to self-direction, leadership, transfer, it started to taper off a bit, and my scores were the same. So while I identify these values, I'm not teaching them yet with the consistency that TPSR would encourage you to do. I don't know if that's what other breakout groups found.
And do you find that it's normally, you said it doesn't have to go in order, but is there a little bit of a hierarchy here? Is it generally kind of one enables two and two enables three, and it kind of moves a bit like that?
So we did speak about that, and it's I think you're right. We said something in the group, sorry, I can't remember, maybe Nick said about the fact that we kind of feel like once you've got 1 and 2, maybe in SAS, once you do 1 and 2, then you can do the other ones, you know. And I think that people that have worked with TPSR, and there's been a lot of research done worldwide in physical education and sport, but not in skiing or snow sports, is that I think it's to try and discourage people away from thinking you need to do levels 1 and 2 before you progress to the other ones. I think you're right. I think that it's kind of, there's a tendency that we have to have 1 and 2 in place before they do the other ones, but you can address any of them in any order, and that's probably what the next part's going to be about. And I'm thinking for time, I was looking at the slides,
Yeah.
We'll maybe skip the next breakout because I
Yeah.
think we've covered some of that, and we can go into. So we've kind of talked about that in the breakouts, right? So here's the kind of new stuff, I guess, and this is the framework which I think Chip kind of spoke about in relation to the spectrum of teaching styles. That well, we might do some of these things, and these things might, to use your word again, intuitive. Well, we might do those 5 values, and they might be intuitive to what we do. The whole point of the spectrum of coaching styles is a framework through which we teach it. And like the spectrum of teaching styles is a framework with TPSR, it's called the daily format. So Don Hellison developed this, and it's got, by coincidence, I guess, has these 5 different aspects of it. And this is what I think is really cool because of the unique environment that we coach in. So if you look at a badminton coaching session, for example, it doesn't last for 6 hours, not that I know of anyway. Or, you know, like a soccer coaching session will not last for 6 hours. So the snow sports coaching environment is quite unique in that sense that we spend a lot of time with the same kids compared to other sports as a regular part of what we do. You know, like there's a real difference. So basically, to make those values come to life in a consistent and purposeful way, Hellison came up with those 5 different things. So relational time, where the coach's individual conversations or counselling near start or towards the end of session. Now, I've taken that from, I did some minor amendments 10 minutes before the presentation. And I've taken this from Barry Gordon's work. I've not referenced it. Barry Gordon's someone in our research team. He's published books, papers, all kinds of things about TPSR. So he's part of our research team for this. But to me, that counselling doesn't need to be the start or the end. It can be any time. And in fact, the example I gave was on the T-bar with the athlete I had, and that happened, I guess, in the middle of the day. It was just an opportunity where I saw it as an opportunity. I thought, this is a way I can really home in on the resilience that kid has learned the whole season. And when I spoke to the parents about how much this kid has developed as a human and in terms of resilience and coping with adversity, they were as much pleased about that as his technical development. And I think the research we've still got to do. It's quite cool in some ways, I think. But things are moving so fast. I've not spoken to Tracy or Barbara about this, but the next part of this project is going to be as well asking parents a bit about what they think about this kind of work and what we're doing, and also to do with what the athletes think about it as well. So the point is, for that relational time that Hellison called it, you can be doing that at any opportunity on T-bars, chairlifts, you know, when you're having a wet weather, off the snow type thing. The second one, awareness talk, happens typically that would be at the start of the session. I see that, I guess, happening in warm-ups where you can do a warm-up, but you can start to, this answers your question, Chip, about the 5 values. So that awareness talk could be, actually, we've got an issue about respect, maybe, that we need to be really, it might be that there was a respect issue happened the day before. So in the awareness talk, doing the warm-up, we come back to what happened that previous day and we say, look, you know, guys, I think we could be working more on, you know, like our respect for each other. I think that was something that is an area that came up yesterday. We could be developing that a bit more, and I want to just highlight a few points about what I mean. So that's bringing it into their attention, that repetition of an issue, and it's building it, unpacking it, bringing it into the forefront, bringing it into their thinking. Then to me, what they could have is reflection time. So you could maybe do that. And the last one there is, this is the completion, but it can be any time as well. We're on the chairlift. We've talked about it in the awareness talk. I wanted to think about respect and what we mentioned when you're on that chairlift, when we meet at the top of toppers or whatever it is, to do the training properly, then we can do that. That ties into physical activity. That's the medium, the movement medium through which we do our work, our coaching work, and that's where we've got a platform to teach these values. The group meeting, you can think about where that might happen. That just could be a conclusion at the end there. We'll all come together and we talk about things that have happened in that session. It might even be going back to the awareness talk, where maybe respect was something we were actually really concentrating on. and we talk about how respect might have developed, or our ideas or our thinking about respect has really improved during that time. An example very quickly of something that happened as well this season. One of my kids put out a ski pole, or what do you call them over here? You call them battens or something, right? What do you call them? I can't really call them, but you give it a name for them. Somebody help me. What do you call ski poles in Australia?
Talking about
Stocks. Yeah. So he put his stock out, right, to this snowboarder. They never knew. There was a little uphill part on the way to Guthiga. And the snowboarder says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Oh, I'm giving you a hand here. I'm putting my stock out to help you." And the snowboarder was blown away. He's like, "Wow, that's great. Thanks so much." Now, that's a teachable opportunity for me, because that's under caring for others. And I made a point there about, and that could be in my group meeting, would be, you know what? I really liked what Chip did today. Chip gave his stock out. Don't know if you saw it. Helped his snowboarder up. That's a really good example of caring for others. And we really value that. And we find that as a group, that's one of the things that we value in our program. And that's, when you share that and you make a point of it, the kids then look for opportunities to do that. And it's making that representation. All right, so there's some ideas. So we've got a next breakout, which is the next slide. Just conscious of time to get, so it's not my voice the whole time, but if you go into the next slide, Chip. So this one here, so if you were to adopt TPSR in your own programs, what might the TPSR daily format look like for you? So you might need to go back to that previous slide, Chip, so people can get a photograph, and then we can get into it.
Yeah,
So
great.
Yeah.
So what we're curious is, how could you use these different ways of communicating with the athletes to move forward on some of the TPSR themes, right? And I love that. So the relational time, I'm just going to summarize it in my simpleton way of thinking. The relational time, what I heard from you is that it's like the time, those moments, almost moments in between moments, when you're on the chair, when you're getting ready, and there might not be a big agenda at that time. It's really time to build your relationship and build your trust with the athletes. And I like that distinction between that and the awareness talk, which is it's a bit more focused on something that happened yesterday, something that you want to work on today, something that you're thinking about. It's kind of like laying a theme into the work. And then the training session happens, and I really love the idea of coming back at the end of the session and kind of recapping, checking, how did we do with that? Like, what did you notice? What happened? And what you said it quick, but it's such a powerful thing that, when we start to notice if you're trying to build these behaviors in people, when we start to notice where it's already happening and give it oxygen, give it energy, notice it and reinforce it, it grows. Like
exactly.
what we give energy grows, right? So
exactly.
if we see someone, as you said, if we see someone helping someone else and we want to grow that quality in our team, the very best way is to notice it and call it out. Let people just subconsciously recognize, oh, that gets noticed here. That's appreciated by my coach, who I deeply respect. And a little trigger wakes up inside of us that says, I'm going to look for opportunities to do that.
Absolutely.
Cool. So we've got a short breakout room, so we're respectful of time. Just 3 to 4 minutes with your group. How could you intentionally apply these, one or more of these approaches in your coaching with your athletes? Rooms are open. Jump on in. Let's see if we can peg down to a couple specific ways.
All right, Chip, you're the master of the time here. Do you want to kind of pull this part together? We covered a few things.
Yeah, it's a bit tight. I wasn't sure. I knew I was probably interrupting a few people. But I think, to your invitation, John, I think the big call is just to really just think about these opportunities in a daily format and how you can consciously apply. I'd love to hear 1 or 2 examples of what came out. you know, what people thought. Ethan, where do you see application for this?
I think sort of like the biggest thing that came, like what we all sort of, I think we all agreed on at the end there, was just keeping this more like getting it more consistent and keeping it more consistent. I feel like most of us do some of these things, but it's like once a week or twice a week. It's never really every single training session. But yeah, I think that was the biggest thing, was just trying to get it more consistent through the whole training week and training day.
I think that's really cool. And I totally agree. And I've seen some of you in action doing these things quite naturally, but I think it's quite interesting to become a bit more deliberate about it and think of them as, you know, practices. Think of them as, these are the things that actually, you know, in the same way that you have your athletes do some things every day because you know it helps them be their best. This might be, these are tools for you to apply every day that are going to help you be your best. Tim, Gail, reflections from your perspective?
We were talking about it from our point of view as coaches. We're pretty good at setting up a day, but sometimes that group meeting or reflection towards the end doesn't tend to happen so much. We move on to the next thing pretty quickly, or athletes go home quickly, and we don't get to kind of sum the things up at the end of the day and show them what really hit for us.
Yeah, I think that's a super, super cool point. This whole notion of kind of getting complete with the day, you know, is, you know, we're as you say, we're so often we just, you know, we're moving on to the next thing, but we actually miss the opportunity to close the loop on things. And it doesn't have to necessarily take a long time, but can actually have quite a profound effect on people's ability to kind of like take away what they need to from each day. So I think that was one that my eyes leapt to immediately. Phil Reynolds, how about for you? What are you thinking about in Colorado?
I really like the relational time. I tend to use like a morning meeting type structure where I set intentions so that I can be purposeful in the training session, and it gives us a chance to kind of check in on, you know, what we thought we were going to work on, what we are going to work on, and I think this would be a good time to kind of incorporate some more of these TPSR initiatives.
That's cool. That's cool. And I can imagine that relational time as you described and get it, you know, being intentional. And so we're not just like putting our boots on and getting out there and getting on the lift, but actually having the moment to kind of sharpen the saw and go, wow, what is our intent today? You know, what did we come into the day, and how do we want to, how are we going to choose, what are we going to make of this day? That you can imagine tying in really well with what Tim was saying, then circling back and go, well, how, you know, this was what we intended. How did we do? Where do we end up? Could be super powerful.
Yeah, I also like video review as a time to kind of circle back and touch on all those things. And again, some of the, you know, celebrating effort and cooperation and helping others, and that would be a good time to kind of review all of that as well.
Yeah, great, really great. I totally agree, because you're a little bit out of the fray at that moment, right? So people just have a little more space in their thinking. They might be able to receive some insight or some reflection even from you at a different level, right? So yeah, very cool.
How are we doing for time? But we're nearly finished, I think. Chip,
yeah,
anyway.
talk to us, John. Where
Yeah. There was just one observation, and the more what I find with all my teaching and writing and everything else, the more that I think about it, reflect about it, talk about it with different people, it gives me more insight. I think about it deeply, maybe too deeply. Like when I'm having a shower in the bathroom, I'm often thinking about this stuff. It's, you know, you never switch off. But for me, I'm thinking, you know, the kids would get bored shitless. Maybe shouldn't have said that really, but they're going to get really bored if you say things like, right, now today's awareness talk is, and we're going to have reflection time on the chair. I reckon you just call it different things, you know, and it just becomes just something that you do, but we don't necessarily overly draw attention to it. Although in our own heads we know that we're teaching the five values, and we're also teaching we're using the daily format to do it. But I think if you can skillfully weave in but you don't have to name it for what it is. You're not going to say, like, we're going to have this, we're going to do some video feedback here, and we're going to use it as, you know, relational time or whatever it is, because the kids will get sick of that, you know. But I think if you weave it in, and you don't have to call it what it is, but we know we're doing it. That was just an observation.
I think that's a really, really great point, John. We can be 100% intentional about it and covert in a way, right?
Absolutely.
That we know what we're doing. We know it's relational time, or we're building awareness, but they just need to have the experience, right? I think that's great. I think that's really strong point.
So I'll just kind of lead the next couple of bits. We can get through it really quickly. So we're at the kind of final stages, if that's okay.
Yeah, do it.
Sure. Right. So the next slide, right, this one here, right? So the breakout, we've covered a lot of the stuff that we would have done in breakouts. So this is something actually that I thought we'd put in because it's about the kids taking ownership. So one of the things we do at Perisher, I'm sure you do in your other clubs, is we have to give an end of season report. And that's usually the coach is making that assessment. But what you can use, and it comes from physical education as well, is self-assessment as well, where I'm thinking of one athlete in particular in our program. This athlete wins like regularly races, does a lot of training, lots of gait training, but they're one of the worst people for participation effort if it's not gates, and that includes warm-up as well. So, for example, for that kid there, I could give them a self-assessment checklist, which is actually going to be in my next slide, but just keep that one there at the moment, Chip. But basically, okay, I'll say to them, which level do you think you're working at? And they'll say, oh, I think I'm working really highly in participation effort. A bit like how we self-scored ourselves earlier on. I'd say I'd give myself a 5 for that, and I'll say, well, I'm more thinking like a 2. And they say, oh, why is that? And I say, well, we've talked a lot about warm-up, free skiing, how you don't want to do that, and you drag your heels. So for me, I might not use that language with them, but that's what I'm thinking in my head. So I would say a 2. And in some ways, it kind of makes the kids want to take this on board, because certainly in the Alpine program, the parents are big drivers of this. And it's like they want their kids to succeed, they expect their kids to have the best reports. And when that kid that's winning everything gets a 2 for participation effort or a low score, it's not a surprise at the end of the season, because during the season, I've brought it to their attention. They've self-assessed themselves, they've taken ownership for their learning, and they've given themselves a lower score by negotiation about the participation efforts, not just smashing through gates. It's all the other things. And I guess if we're talking about in this forum, kids going to Olympics, and you know, I'm not teaching granite to suck eggs here, but you all know that to get to that level, you've got to do a lot more than just smash through gates or be in the moguls or whatever it is. You've got to be doing all the other things that we all know. But those kids have got to learn to value those things, rather than us repeatedly saying to them, why are you not doing the free skiing? Why are you not doing the warm-up? What's going to happen when you go to Olympics and you have to do a warm-up yourself? And I'll not be there or whatever it is, right? So I think this is drawing their attention about 0. You know, the person I'm talking about would probably get a 0 for irresponsibility for their level of participation and effort. So basically, there's different things you can look at in your own time. If I go on to the next one, next slide, we're almost kind of done. This is from Shane's work, Shane's book. I think I've got it in the reference list at the end. So Shane teaches about all pedagogy the same way as I do, but this is using TPSR. It needs to be unpacked a bit, maybe, and certainly adapted to your own context. But again, level 0 is this irresponsibility level, where they're unmotivated, undisciplined, lacking responsibility. And, you know, people tend to think, well, they're in Winter Sports Club. How great is that? They've got that opportunity. But we do get kids who are unmotivated, undisciplined. They don't take responsibility. And I think we're paying them a big disservice if we're not looking actively for ways to get them to be the kind of people we need them to be. And TPSR is one way, evidence-based, it's been shown to work, that we could do that. And again, my last slide, I'm sure Chip's going to share this with you, but this idea of they self-assess rather than the coach assessing for the reports. And I think maybe on to my last one. I might, yeah, after that, which is the one before that. So the one
Oh,
there
sorry.
about, yeah, wait a minute. Sorry, hold on a second. Program by, yeah, sorry, wait a minute. Just gone to that one there about program buy-in contracts. Next one. Yeah, this one here. I just wanted to draw attention to this a bit. We're talking about the kids buying into this idea. Why should they do it? One of the things is contracts. I'll just mention this briefly, right? So contracts, we have been went to a sports club. They come out on a wet day. The parents, I'm one of those parents. My wife will sign the contract at the start of the season and we hand it in and that's it, end off. We never really refer to it very much unless there's a disciplinary problem. Maybe Jan Vockety will talk to the parents about there's been a breach of the contract. By us not looking at that contract on a more regular basis, we're basically telling the kids, the athletes, it's not that important, you know. But we'll bring it out if it's a wet day and we've got to go in or something. But to me, I actually did a mapping exercise of our contract for our athletes, and I could map all the TPS values in there. And I think that if we're serious about those contracts, rather than use as a punitive thing, I'd like to see the contract more living and breathing and something we visit in relation to the different levels of TPSR, because in that contract, there's things about respecting the athletes, officials, inter-schools officials, where are often treated quite disrespectfully. And I'd like to model that behaviour. I actually bought some beers for the race department at Perisher, Scottish beers, because these are the beers that are actual proper quality beers, right? So I bought them some beers at the end of the season as a way of me caring for them and saying, I really respect what you do, because often people take it for granted. They kind of use a lot of people. I'm not saying necessarily to do that, but you know what I mean? They don't appreciate what people do. And I think appreciation and gratitude relates to this as well. And I'm kind of, yeah, that's kind of fit. My final things, the next slide.
And
Which
just
is,
before,
yeah, sorry, on you go. Sorry, Chip.
just before you go there, John, I think what I really like about this table is, you know, I could imagine having a conversation early in the season, middle of the season, end of the season with an athlete that quite simply goes through these categories. And what's nice about the dot points is it kind of it just makes it tangible. You know, these are the behaviors we're looking for. And how do you know, how are you doing, you know, how often are you doing these and where could you up your game, you know? And I think just building awareness and if these are the things we want our athletes to be building, you know, kind of just finding ways to communicate that with them and have them, as you say, buy into it, acknowledge, self-assess, all of that.
So I'm looking at number 3 there about praises the efforts of others, only using positive comments. So that's from Shane's work, and that's the example I gave of the kid with the stock, giving it to a snowboarder, and I mentioned that positive behaviour. So that kid's going to go. Most kids are going to go away thinking that's great that was mentioned. You know, that the coach highlighted that about me, rather than saying, you know what, that was amazing what you did in those short turns through the moguls. You know, like there's just so much more to what we do than just focusing on technical performance.
It's great. It's great, John.
So the final thing here is, I know from various conferences that we go to that you get maybe some enthusiasm and some ideas, and before you know it, you've forgotten about it, you're on to the next thing. As I think Ben mentioned there about what happens sometimes in his coaching, they don't have an end of day meeting and you're on to the next thing. So what I'm thinking, I'm kind of answering this question. So as part of the research that I've proposed in our faculty, excuse me, is to develop some resources in consultation with the coaches during next season, things that are going to be workable, user-friendly, and just kind of tools and resources that will help you to actually do this kind of work. Not big, long, text-heavy things, but things that will actually be useful in your context. It might be prompts, it might be self-assessment checklists for the athletes, just different things, different ideas about how you can bring this to life. So that was what I was thinking.
It's great. And maybe just given the time, maybe what we could do is have this a little bit of homework. We can send out the slides and the PDF article with just a question for the group. You know, how what kind of tools would be most helpful for you that John and the team could think about and work on leading into the next season?
Can I just add a quick thing there too? I think the other thing I'd love people to also think about is, would anyone in this group be able to feed us ideas of what they think are some of the practice things they've done that make a difference?
Definitely.
And I've heard already in this group some really key, little gems. And I wonder if the group might also think about feeding in some of those for us to incorporate, because those real life examples seem to click for many of us in when we're learning. So just a suggestion.
Thanks so much, Barbara. I'm really pleased you said that. That's a lost opportunity, or a missed opportunity if you hadn't said that, because people are doing this stuff and it's about working in collaboration. That's how we're going to get real strength, especially this kind of forum.
It's great. I think it's something that we can revisit and come back to. And, you guys are fully immersed and knowing this group and, why you even were chosen and nominated to be part of the academy is because of the level of care and commitment that you bring to your athletes. So I know that you're naturally bringing forth these qualities, drawing them out, and I'm sure you guys will be of great help to this research team. So very cool. Barbara, Tracy, John, thanks so much for great sharing tonight. Really thoughtful and really interesting. I agree with you, Barbara. Super cool to hear the examples of how this already is alive in this group's coaching.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the opportunity, Chip, and everybody else. I've really enjoyed the discussion, and I'd like to say yourself, Chip, when we had these chats the other day there, I mean, your enthusiasm for this is infectious as well, and I think that's really motivating for the team to have that. When you saw the instant value of this, we are super excited about it. It's just such an amazing thing, and when people start using it and seeing the opportunities for doing it in their work, I think it will grow arms and legs.
Awesome. Really awesome. Thanks everybody for taking the time. John, thanks so much for coming and building this presentation and sharing your wisdom and experience with the group.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks all.
Team, I'm bummed that we're not able to meet for the live lab next week in Jindabyne. I was freaking looking forward to that, but we're gonna build the mothership bigger for just after the overseas season and make sure we get everybody there. I mean, it's a great sign actually, because it means more and more coaches are out and about doing things in New Zealand and Canada and Colorado. So it's a bummer that we can't get everybody together right now, but it's great for the sport and great to know that you're all moving out into the universe. And we'll keep doing these monthly gatherings. We got a couple really cool sessions coming up in the next couple months, and we'll start dropping into some sort of smaller group pod sessions by discipline as well. So let's stay in touch. Thanks everybody for leaning in tonight and sharing your stories and just being here. So cool. Total highlight for me of the month.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chip.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. See ya.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. That was great.